In this tutorial, we want to create a simple game with React.js. It's tic-tac-toe. At the end of this tutorial, you will be able to create this game. It's tic-tac-toe. There is 9 blocks, and when you click on each one, the first user, which is X, select and fill that one, and the next user is O, and they play until one of rows get occupied by one user. So there is a state that no one is win, but if you refresh and click like this, the user X will win because one row is filled by X. So you will be able to create this game, which comprises of a board and a status which shows the winner or next player step, a turn, and a history of game, so you can go back and forward to steps of game anytime you like. What you will learn here is create a React app, create components, extracting and composing components, manage state in components, and lifting a state up in component. What you are supposed to know is JavaScript basics, ES6 syntax, and React basics. Let's take a look at tic-tac-toe game. First, you have to draw the board, which is made of a 3x3 grid of square. Then you have the first player go first, the first player go with X, the second player goes with O. Keep alternating moves until one of players have drawn a row of 3 symbols or until no one can win. To create this application, you need to install stuff like Visual Studio for your code editor and Node.js as a runner. So install Visual Studio Code from Microsoft and Node.js from Node.js.org. Then you are ready to create the application. Now it's time to create React app. First of all, run npx create React app tic-tac-toe in your console. From terminal, open console, and inside the console, go to your favorite folder. I put my projects in projects folder, and here I use npx create-react-app and enter the name of your application, which is tic-tac-toe. Great, press enter and wait a few minutes to create your very first React application. First of all, you need to create square.js. It's a component to create the square block. First of all, open the folder you have created, tic-tac-toe, and then open terminal, then run npm start. Now close the welcome window, and inside the src folder, right click and create new folder. Components is the name of your folder, and inside component folder create new file square.js with capital S. Here it's time to create a Square component. We're gonna create a functional React component. You can type RFC and press tab to create this functional component. What we wanna do in a Square component is to create a button. So replace div with button, and inside this button we wanna put a value which comes from probs. It's the caption of this button, and it comes from probs. I mean the parent component. So inside the square function, put probs as a parameter, and the parent component set the value of the button through this parameter. And this button is gonna react to click. So we put onClick event and set it to probs also. Prob on click. And set a class name of square to square like this. And the square component is ready to use in board component. But before go there, let's create the CSS class for square. Add these two class to your CSS. The CSS is inside src folder, app.css, remove all CSS and just put this one. The square CSS comprises of multiple parts. The background is white, the border is 1 pixel solid gray. It's float because we're gonna put 3 square next to each other. The margin to right and top is -1 pixel because remove additional margin which comes from border. Set padding to 0, and it's the important part, width and height to 80 pixel. Set text align to center because when you put X or O, it's gonna be in the center of the block. Set font size to 40 and weight to bold, and line height is gonna be 80 pixel. That's all about CSS class for square, and when you click on it, we're gonna don't have any border around it, so outline is gonna be none. Very good. Let's create the board component. To create a board component, right click on component and click new file. Name the file board.js, and here we're gonna create class-based component. React class component, press tab, and you have your basic class component. The first step is to include a square component we already created from /square. So we need it inside board component, and inside this class we need to render a square component which accepts an index and return a square component which values is this dot probs dot squares index I, and onClick is this dot probs dot onClick I. It should be like arrow function. So here we have the render square. For each calling of this function, we return the square component which the value comes from the parent component of board, which is game, and the onClick responder comes from the parent component, and it responds to the onClick and send the parameter I. So in the render method remains the easy part. Here we need to create a dev for creating a border roof. So the class name would be border roof, and inside each border roof we need to call render square 3 times. The first one is with 0, second one with parameter I, because it's gonna be array index based, and create 3 border roof, but set the indexes to 3, 4, 5 for second roof, and for the last one 6, 7, 8. That's it. We created the board component which shape the boxes for tic-tac-toe game. Let's create a border roof class. Very simple. In the app.js, put border roof after clear both, because we're gonna put the next boxes in new line and set content to empty and set display as table. Save the file, and we created the board component here. The game component, it's the most important part. So we split it to multiple parts. First of all, we create the constructor. So right click on component folder, new file, and set the name game.js. Here we want to create React class-based component. Press tab, and here we need to create constructor which accept probs, and the first function is super probs, because we need to call super probs inside each component that inherit from react.component. So don't forget. Great. Here is where states comes. First of all, we need to set the default state for multiple stuff. The first one is x is next, which is a flag that determine is it x time or o time to go as a player. So at first is true because the first player in tic-tac-toe is x. The second state is a step number, and the default value for a step number is 0 because there is no steps at the beginning. And the most important one is history, which save the history of steps in the game. It's an array, and the array item is object of squares, and at the beginning it's an array 9 that each items is null because no one played at the beginning. I just format the code, and here we create a constructor for game component. The next part is the render method. In the render method, first of all, we need a div which its class name is game, and another div inside which is class name game board. Great. Inside this, we use board component, and when you press tab, it included automatically. And here, if you go back to board component, you need to know how many probs does it needs. The first prob is squares, which is an array, and the second one is onClick. So here I set onClick, which accept the index of a square which is clicked, and this dot onClick with the index parameter, and the second parameter or probs for board is squares, which is current square, current dot squares, and close the component. Here we need to set the current state of the square in the render function. But before that, you need to define the history, which comes from state, and define current state to history, and the index of history we're gonna put for current is step number, this dot state dot step number. So this variable has a property which is square, and has the current state of our board. Set the CSS for game. Here it's the game, and this CSS stuff put the game board at the center of the screen vertically and horizontally. The next step we're gonna do is to use game component inside app.js. Remove all the stuff from return method and just set game component. There you are. You have the initial state of your game component. If you click on it, it will not work because we didn't implement it on click. So the next step is to implement the on click. In the game component, change the on click to handle click, and inside the class define handle click I method. First of all, we need to create a copy of current history. So define const story this dot state dot story and use slice function 0 and this dot state dot step number +1. So we have a copy of previous state in the history. The next constant we're gonna define is current, which is last item in the history. So simply put history and inside bracket put history dot length -1. Create another constant which is duplicate of squares that comes from current dot square dot slice. It created a copy of squares and put it inside a square constant. To find is it the X turn or O turn, you can use this dot state dot is next. So set the square I to this dot state dot X is next. If it's true, the next one is X, but if it's false, the next one is O. So it's time to use set state to put the new history to the history. So here set history is equal to history dot concat to add, and inside concat put the new object, which is square is current square, and change the player turn X is next step to this dot state dot X, the reverse of current user. Use this exclamation character. And the last change in the history is a step number, which is the length of history array. That's it. Let's check the game. Here, if you put on a square, you see the first player is X and X put inside the square. And if I click on another box, I see O, X, O, and you see the game work as expected, but we need to make progress to the game because there is no winner and we need to find the winner. So it's time to calculate winner. Create a function outside of the class because it's independent of the class. and it's a helper function, calculate winner. It just accepts the score and returns the winner. By default, it returns null. If there is no winner, it returns null. To calculate the winner, we need to find a path that make a player winner. We put this path inside lines variable, which is an array of array. The first item is the first way to win, which is the index of array 0, 1, 2. If player X or O fill 0, 1, and 2 with its sign, it will win. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and vertical 1, 3, 6, and other ways of a player can win the game. So we need to check the score items to this path. So create a for loop for I to 0, I less than lines.length, I plus plus, and inside that we need to check the score to the line. Just define A, B, C from lines I and use a simple if square I is exist, if square A is exist and it's not null, I mean there is X or O inside square O, square A, and square A is equal to square B, and square B is equal to square C. If it's true, return square A. That's it. In this simple for loop, we find X or O or null. If the return value is X, the X is winner. If the return value is O, O is winner. If it returns null, there is no winner. It's time to use calculate winner inside handle click. Here you only need to use const winner to calculate winner and put the square to this function. If we have winner, there is no need to continue the game, so return. And if there is no winner, we set the next step to play. We need to add another condition to the handle click in the winner part. If there is a value inside square I, the other player cannot change it. So there is a value inside square I, we return and don't change the state because the previous player occurred that square. So let's check the game. Here, oops, there is a mistake and we need to change it to square I like this. Oops. Here you see, because there is a winner, clicking on the other parts of the square will not work. Okay, we are like blind in this game because there is no helper or guide or the next player part or the winner. So we need a part for game info which shows the steps and the winner and the next player turn. Inside render method, here we need to find a winner each time the component is gonna be rendered. So here we define winner, which is calculate winner current dot square, and defined a variable moves, which is a JSX variable which converts the history through map function, which has step and move. And inside this function we return a JSX object which we show in the game. First of all, we define a desk variable with check move. If move is 0 or null, it's the beginning of game. Go to start the game. But if there is a value inside move, which has said go to number plus move. So if it's the first item of history, we said start the game, but if it's not the first one, we said go to number. So it's the caption of the button that move a user to the history of game. Here we're gonna return a JSX object which is a list item and its key is move. And inside this list item we put a button which is on click event. It's this dot jump to move, which we will implement jump to later. And the value and the caption of this button is desk. Now it's time to set the variable, to define the variable status and check the winner. If there is a winner, the status of our game is winner is winner. And the else part define the next player turn. So the status next player is X is next. If X is next, it's X, else is O. And put it inside parentheses. And it's come from state. We use status inside the program, inside the render return part. Next to game board, create another div, which is class name is game info. And inside that, we need to define two div. The first one is status, and the last one is moves. I formatted the code. You see, this is the new div. Let's check the game. Okay, the next player is X. Before that, let's add a CSS for game in the app.css. At this part, we just need UL set padding to 30 pixel, game info margin right 20 pixel, and status margin button 10 pixel. And inside the app game.js, change the moves container from UL from dev to unordered list, because inside move we return list item and the parent of list item should gonna be UL. Let's check the game. You see, start game. Oops, we didn't implement it. Jump to. So it's time to implement jump to, which the parameter is a step. And here we just use set state to change the step number to current step, to the step that user jump to, and the x is next is equal to step modulus 2 if is equal to 0. Great. Let's click an item and you can play the game like this, and you see the winner is O. If you click the other part, it will not work. You can press start game, and the next player is X, O, X, O, X, and the winner is X. We need to create a space between winner is and the X. Let's go to the game code and find the, you see, winner is, and put a space there, and you see winner is X. You can go to step 3 and change the plan of code. Start the game, step 1, step 2, step 3. You see, you have a history of your game here. Let's make the code beautiful by adding this CSS to the code instead of a square part only. You see, just remove the square part and replace it with this one, and check the game. You see, it's much beautiful. I just refresh the game. You see, it's much beautiful, and the winner is X. Thank you for your watching. In this lesson, you have learned how to create a React application, how to create multiple components, extracting and composing components, which are the square component, the board component, the game component, and putting components inside each other. You find how to manage a state in component and lifting state up from a square to board, from board to game, and it's a good start for you to create your first React app. Create this type of application in GitHub, put your source code there and improve it, and use that inside your resume because it's very important in your interview. You have such type of game which shows how you understand React state, props, and stuff like that in action. Until next lesson, bye-bye.